Hey everybody, welcome to Tuesday, and today is going to be a women in gaming topic, female character analysis and gaming topic. Those tend to be popular. I'm trying to do at least one video a week, non-Wellness Wednesday, that is a just regular, normal content, not related to the crowdfund, though this does tie into some of the thinking we did in the game. If you want more direct inspirations for the game, you want to hear more about that, we are going to stream again tonight. Mary Jess and I are going to stream tonight on Twitch at 7:30 Eastern. I know that is late than usual, but we are dueling time zones, and I got called into lecture last minute at my college gig as a fill-in yesterday, so the extra time before I start is essential. I can't be two places at once, even with Zoom. I'm not going to throw to the Patreon right now. The Kickstarter is the priority right now. I'll do the Patreon at the end, but Boss Fight, Song of Sparkle Muffin, in its final week, we worked out we're going to have 30, it's up to 39 now, of people's pets in the game. I think that might be more than Lady Bits or Boss Fight pet pictures. So that makes us excited. It inspired us to have a slightly more meaningful role for people's pets. So, it'll be cool. And we want to hear from you tonight on Twitch about what classic games meant something to you. They don't have to be adventure games. They don't have to be RPG, just older games that you liked and why. If you can't make Twitch, I will be posting it, the replay. I'll be porting it over to YouTube so you can watch it there. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the female fear factor and how it relates to game design. Now, this is inspired by the whole J.K. Rowling thing from yesterday. If you followed my Twitter feed at all, I was utterly fascinated by the ongoing saga of these three gender non-conforming people with signs that took a picture. It wasn't a flattering message, but they were holding up pro-trans protest signs outside of the front gate. It's a wall and a giant drawbridge door type thing outside of J.K. Rowling's house. And J.K. Rowling claims that her privacy was invaded because they posted the picture with her address. Now, I posted, that's bad form, that's dumb, because it gives her the opportunity to scream. But throughout the day, it unrolled that Harry Potter fans have done the exact same thing and posted the pictures and video on YouTube. Apparently, the house has its own website. It's a historic home, and various media outlets have published the intersection the house is at, because apparently there's an ongoing struggle with the privacy hedges she put up, so people can't see in, and they need frequent maintenance, and so there are traffic problems sometimes in that intersection because J.K. Rowling lives there. So this idea that it was reasonably assumed by these three protesters that she would feel menaced, and the fact that the media just picked up on this breathlessly without any sort of scrutiny of the claim that J.K. Rowling made on Twitter that, they're trying to menace women. This is based on societal assumptions, right? That women are inherently afraid of the world and should be inherently afraid of the world. And this is a assumption that bounces back and forth between media and the real world, and there's an interplay here, and that's what I want to talk about regarding games, because there is a through line to the Smile More Samus Aran take that somebody at Kotaku had of, geez, she should have been more emotional in in Metroid Dread during certain scenes. And no, why? It's freeze, fight, or flight. Samus is a fight character. Why would she show some horrified response? It is judging her as a woman, not as an individual character with a lengthy track record and consistency about how she reacts in things, except for Metroid Other M, which most people don't count because it was so bad and so not in keeping with the other Metroid series. There's a whole track going back through the ongoing attempts to make Lara Croft, a character that a player will want to protect because she's female instead of assist because she's a badass. It's interesting because Core, that was the original design directive stated by Core, that there wanted to be a protective feeling. That's not at all what happened in playtesting, in part because of the hilarious ragdoll physics, in part because why would you want to protect someone that obviously self-sufficient and badass? And so it sort of, Core gave in, and then Crystal Dynamics picked it up and did a really good job. And then all of a sudden with the Tomb Raider reboots, they went back to that, trying to instill a protective instinct in the player because of what Lara is in terms of gender construction, not who she is or what she does. Again, why do you want to protect someone that deadly with an ice pick? Because of grisly murder scenes that you get when she dies. No matter how grisly the scene is, it reloads last save. Oh, checkpoint. Here we are back. It doesn't work. It's going back to all the way back to some of the techniques used in the original Alien movie that tie into the original damsel in distress trope. And the story behind the original Alien was interesting because accounts are mixed. Some people say that Ridley Scott got the script with all the characters gender neutral back for the original Alien. Other things say that they were all written as men, and somebody said, why don't we make her a woman? Knowing which story is the correct one is less important than the reality that making Ripley female has what was a watershed moment in film, and what it meant to have a female protagonist in a horror film. The creators of the film said that part of it was some misdirection, that people wouldn't expect that the woman would be a lone survivor against, the very, very dangerous xenomorph. And so they thought it was an interesting switch, an interesting challenging of expectations. There is an example of challenging expectations that actually worked. It worked because of the way they presented it. They gave the audience, because movies were allowed to be slower off the top back then. The original Alien gave the audience time to get to know Ripley as a character. Not just, woman put in harm's way by monster thing, chest rip, shooty xenomorph, movie over. Lots of slow-mo and cool soundtrack montage clips. That's modern movies. Back when the original Alien was made, there was more breathing room off the top of films. But that, no one's expecting it's gonna be the woman. It was the 70s. So I think it was the 70s. Yeah, Alien's 40 years old, isn't it? Holy shit. Yeah. It was 40 years old in 1979. Yes, it was the 70s. I was right. I'm like, was it the 80s? Question myself there. But the fact that Ripley was a game changer goes back to the whole damsel in distress thing. And the fact that the damsel in distress was a trope associated with innocence. That the shorthand of the pretty blonde maiden was that she's not a combatant. she couldn't really have wronged anyone because those women never were outside unsupervised. It was a trope that was a shorthand for she could not have done anything wrong, okay? She's not a prisoner of war. She's not being captured as some sort of direct vengeance for wrongdoing. This is an innocent. And the fact that the person who kidnaps her is kidnapping an innocent, or in some cases killing the innocent, just instantly shows how villainous they are. Now, of course, in Alien, we don't see the xenomorph as having that kind of higher strategy. The xenomorph is probably just trying to survive alongside everybody else. And so it torques the expectation and the antagonist and the ending to create something new in a way that one could say is subtly new, but it wasn't so subtle. That was a major sea change in film. I mean, God, even after that, female leads don't, action films bomb with female leads. Nobody wants to watch a woman in an action film. People loved Alien. It's considered classic cinema. Like, it's considered a classic movie, not just a classic horror movie. It's considered a classic movie, a classic of sci-fi, a classic of horror, just classic in movie making overall. And Sigourney Weaver's performance was really good, which was another super, super important thing. We get to know Ripley with relatively little dialogue because of the performance. And that's the thing that this female fear factor narrative that is taken over gaming and taking over geek spaces, and J.K. Rowling is leveraging by Zelda, misses, is that this assumption that we don't question when women say they're afraid has a dark side. And that dark side hasn't thoroughly been explored in media. It's kind of a third rail now post Me Too, but this is a very white woman space. I'm going to come right out and say it. And it's important to recognize that when we look at everything surrounding it and why you have to make the presumption that of course she's afraid. That's what women do. They are afraid when anybody gets near their home because women in fear, they're together. First of all, do you want to, have a CEO of your major corporation who's going to be spooked every time somebody gets a little bit menacing? Because that's part of the job. If you think women inherently can't handle that, you're not going to hire a woman as CEO. Right? Similar with elected office, unfortunately, threats are becoming more and more common. They have been common for really high office for quite some time. But even at the state and local level, more and more threats are part of it. If people think that women will just immediately go to pieces the minute there's risk, if it comes down to equally matched candidates every other way, they're not going to vote for the woman because the female fear factor makes people see women as inherently less qualified for positions that involve any sort of menace or threat or danger. Let me tell you, anybody who's ever been a convention model or any sort of live event modeling, car modeling, anything like that, even photo shoots, sometimes there is an element of risk to those jobs. I have been assaulted on those kind of gigs more times than I can count. You have to be pretty tough to do those jobs for any length of time. Just because, yes, stuff happens and people just dismiss women in those roles as bimbos, and you get the what did you think you was gonna happen dressing like that in a public place. It still happens, not as much as it did, but we don't recognize the risk of certain female jobs. And we play up the risk in certain female jobs. The minute you hit a certain level of wealth, when you're buying castles in Edinburgh, for instance, you can pay for security. That import model at the car show, she can't hire private security if it's not covered by the show. You're SOL. There was a period of time I had to bring my own security to events because it was not safe for me to just be there. And I got the real stink eye. I was accused of being a diva and, it's going to ruin people's fun to have security there. I'm not kidding. So when I talk about this stuff, I'm not talking about somebody who, I'm not talking as somebody who hasn't understood menace. I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood. When I was in the 3rd grade, somebody pulled a fake knife on me. And I didn't know it was a fake knife until they stabbed me with it. Funny joke. Not. There was violence in schools. I don't remember if it was the 5th grade. I got my head smashed into a brick wall by a 6th grader. He was twice my size. He was picking on my sister. I intervened. Maybe that says something about me now. So, there were stabbings at my high school. It was not the safest neighborhood. Now, does that mean it was completely unsafe? I don't know. I guess because it was normal for me, you had to do some street proofing, but people walked down the street, right? You took the bus. It wasn't like some areas of the US where you're warned by locals not to take certain public transit after dark because it's gang territory. That was a fun time in Chicago. Ironically, I was down there and that experience happened. We were there for the Harry Potter costume exhibit with a friend of mine. Interesting coincidence there. But this idea that women are encouraged to be afraid does bleed in to our expectations of women in media, in fictional roles. And it was interesting because Sigourney Weaver herself made an interesting quote about this that I want to read as a setup to getting into the actual media part of it. She said the reason that the performance of Ripley resonated as well as the writing worked because they wrote her in a heroic, straight, unsentimental, authentic way. Straight meaning straight, not the sexuality. She said, so many people in the business would have said, well, now we have to make her more sympathetic. And then it's suddenly this token scene that shows we're actually feminine after all. And that's frankly bullshit because that doesn't happen in real life. Ripley doesn't have time to be sympathetic, She could be talking about Samus Aran there. That's in a Good Morning America article. I'll link to the description box just so you can make sure I'm getting the quote accurate. But that is still something that female characters bust up against. Are they sympathetic, right? There isn't this expectation that male characters be sympathetic. We have this Byronic mold that men more often than women are allowed to inhabit, where they're mad, bad, and dangerous to know and don't have to be traditionally sympathetic. And Lara Croft is a Byronic hero. She checks all the boxes. Old school Lara, not the reboot. That's kind of wrecked now. But that's what I loved about her is here was a character that was in many ways deliberately unsympathetic. How refreshing, right? That she's the protagonist. She's essentially the main character, the playable character. I don't like it when people say protagonist when they mean playable character. But, she's the playable character. She's her opening sequence with the Sherpa and the wolves just immediately brands her as somewhat unsympathetic. And we liked that. There are so many anti-hero playable characters that are men in gaming. And yet there's this demand that women be sympathetic. Show some emotion, Samus. And the interesting thing is a faux woke site like Kotaku didn't recognize why that was wrong and offer a counterpoint article that argued the other side, which I think more websites should be doing. They don't do it because they don't want to pay people. They want to pay for two op-eds when they can do one on the topic. But I have pitched this idea for years and years and years, was only taken up on it once ever. That you do counterpoint articles so that somebody's unpopular view is not stifled, but there's a representative view on the other side. That's how I'd like to see artistic opinion go, especially in gaming, because with something as complex as the interplay of gameplay and narrative, there's a lot of differing opinions about how something worked. I think counterpoint articles would have been fascinating about The Last of Us 2. We weren't allowed to do that. And, there's an example of a character that was incredibly unsympathetic in Abby, but, they killed her father, therefore it's all okay. Why? Because you saw her be sad. Because, the adult put the guilt on a 12-year-old. Oh, Dad, if I was in those shoes, I'd totally want you to kill me. Children should not think that. Not at that age. Not that young. Right? And we excuse all of Abby's terrible behavior because she felt a feel that we could see. Whereas if it was a male character, I really do maintain that there would be far more scrutiny of Abby's decisions by the mainstream, if that was a male character. There are plenty of villains. Every Far Cry villain, eventually you see their point. You still don't agree with what they do. Even if you like them, even if you find them charming, even if you see the evil is coming from somewhere, they're still villains. We still accept that these are not good people. Meanwhile, jump over The Last of Us 2, and they deliberately masculinize Ellie by not showing, her feel scene with Joel until the very end. And they put her in the guy role, which drove me fucking crazy. The farmhouse scene in The Last of Us 2. It's Dina doing the dishes and Ellie going out with the kid and sitting on a tractor and tending to the sheep, And I was sitting there going, Ellie, pick up a fucking dish. This relationship is not going to work if you've got gendered division of labor and you're two fucking women. I think that was somewhat deliberate because you masculinize Ellie to make her less likable. So you push people onto Team Abby, and for whatever reason, Abby's revenge is knowable and fine, even though she went halfway across the frigging country to kill Joel first. But Ellie, for some odd reason, because she is angry, instead of, whimper, 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 I like a boy, and my daddy got killed, and there was a zebra, and Ellie, why didn't you die? I totally would have died. Okay, if you totally would have died, why don't you just stay down now? The whole thing made no sense. But because Abby's feelings were knowable, and Ellie's feelings were, the two names. But, Abby's feelings were knowable. They were right there in front of us. And Ellie's feelings, you had to infer more. I mean, she was showing clear signs of trauma, but she didn't act like a proper woman in her trauma. She wasn't a sobbing mess. She wanted to go kill the people that killed Joel, which we consider that a masculine response. She has a fight response instead of a flight response. And of course she would. Look how she grew up. She was killing fucking clickers at what, 14? Yeah, of course that's her response, right? But Ellie is so punished by the narrative for not being a typical woman because she doesn't have that female fear factor. Whereas Abby's afraid of heights. Oh, immediately makes her so sympathetic. What does a fucking fear of heights have to do with the fact that she committed premeditated fucking murder on a dude and the game wants us to just let her get away with it? Female fear factor. Right there. That's how insidious it is. And this is why I do this sorts of stuff, even though it gets me fucking dogpiled by the proper progressives in gaming, because we really need to examine, we need to unpack how stereotypical this stuff really is and how stuff like this feeds into the fact that there hasn't been a real evolution that's stuck in ethical examinations in video games since the 8 virtues system with the Avatar in Ultima 4. Dragon Age Origins tried to step away from it and created an approval system instead of a morality system. So it wasn't about whether your actions were good or evil. It was about whether your party members approved of what you did or didn't. So you could have Morrigan and Alistair and Liliana and Zavron all have, and Sten, all have different moral codes. And you didn't have to decide which one was evil, which one was good. It was very relativistic and very, very nuanced. And it just got sacrificed on the altar of the fucking dialogue wheel because the dialogue wheel made for clearer renegade paragon choices. Like, oh, you have to put the fucking picture of whether it's flirting or macho or thinking because holy shit, it's so short. You're not saying it's like the dialogue wheel just stripped all the nuance out of the role playing in Dragon Age, and it made me angry and sad. And the reason was analytics, and I get that, but fuck, because from a creative standpoint, it was a step back. Because when you go Paragon Renegade, well, you have to decide whether Jack is a proper woman in Mass Effect, or Miranda is, or Ashley is, right? It's not, because one's a renegade and one's a paragon, and there's an implication of virtue. Like, yes, it's chaotic good versus lawful good under another name, but renegade, anti-hero, paragon, straight up hero. And life is not that simple. Life certainly should not be that simple under a allegedly feminist, non-heteronormative, not cis-normative design structure. And this is the problem. The minute we start flattening a character because of expectations based on gender, we take away huge creative tools out of a creator's toolbox. The fact that a guy who is an anti-hero, it's just, oh, yep, there's a male anti-hero. We know these tropes from Westerns and military movies and, going back in the day. We understand the Byronic hero. But whenever a woman is not paragon, it needs all this explanation in her tortured childhood to make her knowable and sympathetic. And why? Well, because historically in literature, the bad girl gets relegated to the femme fatale role, which is a supporting role, not the lead. We still force these additional virtues on women, and it all goes back to that idea of youthful femininity being associated with an inherently pure moral state. And anybody who has had to deal with teenage girls will tell you that is just not the case, right? That's one of the things that's great about Stargirl. They show teenage girls for all the evil that they are capable of, right? And this is a mistake. This is lazy, and our culture critics in gaming should not be propping this up, but they do all the time. The best thing that game designers can do is create more, not a character exactly like Samus Aran, because that's the mistake they get into with the Princess Peach thing, right? Oh, it was all these Princess Peach copies, and so there were just too many damsels in distress, and it became lazy, right? Overuse of anything is lazy. So come up with another character. I mean, Bayonetta is a really good example of a character that does not have a typical morality and virtue structure, and it works out great, right? But that's associated with a quality game as well. And the problem with these, male, female, select the gender of your character, but we're going to write it essentially as the same character and have all this open-endedness, is that you don't get the challenge of telling a story of an atypical woman and making it work and making the gameplay inform her actions and her actions inform the gameplay and, her motivations and all that stuff. By the end of a video game, because you're interacting with a playable character, you should know them pretty well. The same way in the Uncharted games, every time Nathan Drake has a decision left up to him, he's going to make the wrong choice until right at the end where he finally grows the fuck up, right? We need more of that with female characters and less characters that have to be representatives of all the virtues of womanhood, because we're also stuck with one fucking frame from Project Eve making people still fight to the death when we don't know the context of the image. It's a brief little video clip and somebody screen capped one thing and, oh, she's got super duper hair longer than she is tall, but oh, she's got like metallic butt crack that's kind of a thong. Everybody freak the fuck out. And nobody questions why. Meanwhile, Halle Bailey, who's playing Ariel in the upcoming Little Mermaid movie, wore an outfit on the red carpet to the American Music Awards that looks a lot like the costume circa like Mortal Kombat 7 through 9. Look it up. But of course, the thought controllers in gaming would say no woman would ever dress that way except to get the approval of men. And let me tell you, as a woman who has dressed that way, I never dressed that way to get the approval of men. I dressed that way to scare the shit out of men because I got tired of guys getting pushy at events. And so I created this persona that was intimidating. And so those assaults that happened when I was doing like event modeling didn't happen anymore because I walked in the room with a bearing and a posture and a persona and wardrobe to match that said, sit your ass down and keep your hands to yourself. It wasn't the slightest bit about male approval. It was all about control and controlling my space. And people can't talk about that unless they've been there. And people don't know how that helps you overcome that feminine fear factor. And we have stifled an exploration of that in games by women. Obviously, you can expect some of this in Song of Sparkle Muffin because, Beelzebub don't give a fuck. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. So hopefully you liked this examination of the female fear factor. We could do example after example after example. So that's what I want you to do. I want you guys to unpack this and comment and run with the idea, and I will share a selection of your comments on Feedback Friday. Okay, and if you want to join the private discussions, we are working on a Discord for patrons and Kickstarter backers. Help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or back the Song of Sparkle Muffin Kickstarter. 8 days left. Thanks for watching.